there's something very, very raw about a podcast that speaks to who the person is. No one wants anything blah, and no one wants anything that is unappealing or unrelated to what you're going to be speaking about. So you want to start a podcast. The question is why? Once you know your why, I promise you'll know your how. And it's why you, why it, why now. We are here to answer all those questions. And if you already know the answers to those questions, well, we're going to help you make your podcast a lot more effective. Welcome to our masterclass. My name is Bahumi Mhlongo. Cool. So let's get right into it. Ladies and gentlemen, a podcast is something I had been wanting to start, I think, let's say about 3 to 5 years ago. I didn't really know much about podcasting when it first, broke out. And establishing that why was very important because there were many things actually happening around social media, around our digital platforms that, were up and happening. You know what I mean? Like the question was, why podcasting? Why not start, let's say, a YouTube channel? Why not just keep my streaming and my communication on social media? What is the great perk about podcasting? That's actually what I'm here to answer for you guys today. So let's just get right into it. Podcasting didn't start in the 3 or 5 years ago that I found out about it, of course. And it probably didn't start when you first found out about it, probably, let's say, 10 years ago or so. In fact, I think the first podcast that came about was around 2004, 2005. And I'm sure we all know that podcasting was not popular back then, right? In 2004, I think is when it started. And 2005 was when Apple Podcasts started, and I think they introduced it in their iPods, so it wasn't even just on their cell phones. I remember, I think, seeing it on my iPhone 3. Yes, I had an iPhone 3. Do you guys even know that those existed? They definitely did. So that should be telling about how long, podcasts have been in existence for, but it's only now that they're gaining such great notoriety or great popularity. Why is that? One of the main reasons why is because it's because of its ease and its effectiveness when it comes to communicating with people on a need-to-know basis. So what's different with podcasting as opposed to, let's say, your other audio platforms such as, your radio, is that it's something that you can listen to on the go, whenever, however, and it's something that I think Apple Podcasts soon after launching podcasts, introduce their playback option on podcasts as well. So it's something that you can record, it's something that you can download, it's something that you can stream. So that's a great benefit about podcasts, right? It's a digital audio file that you can stream from the internet at any point you will. And now the great thing about podcasting is that people have also then seen not just the perk of podcasting audio files, but they've also seen the perk of podcasting video files as well. Because initially, it seemed as though there was a gap with people wanting to know information, but just on the go basis, and you can't really do that when you're watching a video, right? So hence, podcasts, audio files are created in the form of podcasts. But that then also kind of created a gap between people who actually enjoy watching things and gain more information from, visual broadcast than just audio broadcast. And so they then integrated podcasting with videos. And now we've got ourselves video podcasts and audio podcasts. So that's a really awesome thing about podcasting, is that it's almost as though you reach everyone all at the same time. You can have a visual element to it, and then you can reach those people, or you can have an audio one, and people can listen to things on the go. It really is for everyone. And if you want to get your message out there, podcasting is definitely for you. So we're going to go through a couple of slides, and I hope that these slides will help you out. They definitely help me out, and I'm here to teach you all the things that help me out throughout my journey. So let's get right into it. I promise you will not regret watching this. So like I said earlier, podcasts are digital video and audio files that you can listen to on the go, right? Because it's something that's on the internet, there is no telling about the kinds of content or the amount of content that you can actually distribute out there. I mean, like, there's many things that you can find out there on the internet. It's the internet. You find literally anything and everything. So whatever it is that you want to find, it's there. Therefore, you as a podcaster, whatever it is that you want to give, that you want to share, it's there. Meaning, people can literally just have a topic that they want to find out about. They can have let's say, a skill that they want to learn, and they can just type it out and your podcast can come on. You literally, the opportunities of conversation are endless on podcasts. And that essentially just speaks to how, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to speak about a particular thing and that's the thing that's just going to run. Your options are literally limitless. You get educational podcasts, you get health podcasts, you get pop culture podcasts, whatever it may be, it's there. So whatever it is that you want to speak to, you can use this platform to do so, right? And so this essentially brings me to what I think is the most important thing when it comes to doing anything really that has to do with distributing things on a digital platform, but particularly podcasts. And that is finding your niche, right? So this is something that people have just kind of misunderstood. There's also been like a number of misconceptions when it comes to finding your niche. People often think that you kind of have to run for the most popular thing, for the thing that's trending in the current moment, or, just something that seems to appeal to the vast majority, right? But that's not necessarily what a niche is, or rather what you should stem your niche from. That shouldn't necessarily be the foundation of your niche. And the reason being is because when you start to do things just because they're trending, when you start to speak about things just because they're popular, you kind of eventually limit your longevity, because you will eventually either lose interest or other people will lose interest, and you're going to have to keep changing your niche as time goes on, right? But there is something that I want to highlight when it comes to the importance of finding your own niche and the very difference between a niche and a target audience, right? So people often think that the best thing to do when it comes to creating a podcast is finding your target audience first, right? And it seems quite wise or quite smart. That's what marketers usually tell us. Find your target audience. Find the people that, will appeal to your podcast. But the issue with the target audience is that it's a lot more vague than that, right? A niche is actually something that is more centralized. And this is essentially what brings us to you, right? Your niche isn't just your target audience, as in the people that you appeal to, but your niche is actually, it's more connected to you than you may think it is. Your niche is actually who you are, right? So the best way that I could describe a niche is the people that are most like you and most like the topic that you are most passionate about, right? So if you are going to be just out there looking for a target audience, looking for what people like, etc., you're essentially going to come to a limit eventually, right? Which is why I say that it kind of stumps your longevity, right? But if you connect your niche to who you are, you'll be able to sustain it because you're consistently talking about things that you're interested in, and then you're talking to people who are interested in the same thing that you are interested in. And that's the important part about a niche. You don't go out there essentially really looking for a niche. You actually look, I want to say, within. You look at what interests you. You look at the things that you like, the things that you dislike, the things that you're passionate about, the conversations that you're passionate about, and from that you'll be able to appeal to those kinds of people. In fact, that demographic will essentially center themselves towards you, which is a lot more different to a target audience. The difference between, or in an example, the best way that I can describe a target audience versus a niche is you could find, let's say, a huge number of people who would say they like dogs. A lot of people like dogs, right? But then the more you kind of centralize it, then the question becomes, okay, you like dogs, do you have dogs? And then you centralize it a bit more, and then you say, okay, do you like dogs and do you have dogs? And are you a person who has dogs that are Labradors, for example? And then you just keep going more and more centered. And once you come to, I want to say, the greater center or as centralized as possible, that's your niche. That's your topic of discussion. And I promise you that's a lot better than finding a target audience, because that means you're essentially trying to appeal to everyone. And it's very difficult to appeal to everyone, or rather appeal to a bigger group, than it is to appeal to people who are more related to you and more linked to you, you know? And when you speak to a niche, you actually speak with more passion. You speak more vehemently than you do speak vaguely, because you're not trying to impress anyone. In fact, people are essentially just organically impressed by what you're saying because they can see that you're speaking in truth, which is one of the greatest things about podcasts as well. A podcast is very different to something that is, let's say, just like a television show of some sort, or it's like a YouTube channel. There's something very, very raw about a podcast that speaks to who the person is. Because it's purely speaking, because it's not me just showing my face, for example, showing, my outfit, showing my day-to-day life. I'm speaking. That means that you are hearing my mind. You're listening to my mind. You're listening to my thoughts. Therefore, you listen to the things that I'm passionate about. When you do that, you start to attract the people who are attracted to the things that, you are passionate about. And people like that. People like the fact that, people like the fact that they feel like they can trust you, as opposed to you just speaking vaguely. So that's the best way to attract a niche. At least that's the best way that I found when it comes to attracting a niche. It's really just centering myself, seeing what I like, what I don't like, what are my interests, and then the people who appeal to that will eventually come. And that's exactly what happened with my podcast. In fact, I found that when I started speaking about things that I really wasn't passionate about, say I was starting out with something that I was passionate about, and in the middle of the conversation, I deviated into what I think many people would like, I started seeing that even the people who were not even for me in any case, actually veered further back, because they were like, there's no substance here. This person, it's almost as though they don't stand by anything. They don't stand with anything. But if you centralize your niche and connect it to your passions and your likes, people will stay because they trust you and they relate to you in a very authentic way. Yeah? So when it came to my podcast, for example, finding my niche was actually quite easy. Expressing that wasn't easy because I knew that the topics of the type of podcast may be quite controversial, but I definitely knew what my niche was because I knew what my interests were. I was interested in education. I was interested in informing. I was interested in wisdom and promoting wisdom. And I was definitely interested in people being able to express themselves. When I realized that those were my interests, it made it easier to be able to talk about the things that I'm passionate about, regardless of, outside opinions and things like that, because I, number one, stayed true to my passions. I stayed true to who I was. And number two, I knew that the right people would come and find it, right? And that's the great thing, again, about a niche. This may sound crass, but you really don't care what anybody else thinks, because this is your podcast. This is your voice. This is a time where you actually get to express yourself with no hindrances. There is no CCMA, BACC that's going to come here and just tell you what to say and what not to say. It's your platform. You get to speak. So when you centralize it to your interests, it becomes a lot easier to speak. And then it attracts, the right audiences. And this essentially brings me to brainstorming podcast ideas, right? So when you brainstorm podcast ideas, it essentially talks about brainstorming the kind of podcast that you want to have, and also the kinds of topics that you want to unpack and speak about, right? It is very difficult to start with a podcast idea or start with a topic if you don't even know who you're trying to appeal to, why you are trying to appeal to them, what's the reason for your podcast, why are you even speaking, what's the point of your voice, why are people listening to you? Are they listening to you just to hear you echo other people's opinions, or are they listening to you because you bring something different, something true and something authentic? When you come up with these ideas, they have to be ideas that are very true to who you are. They have to be ideas that maybe appeal to a minority or appeal to the majority, but an aspect of the majority that they haven't even tapped into. You know what I mean? But these ideas have to come from you. They have to come from the essence of who you are. That's actually what an idea is. It comes from your mental. It doesn't just, you don't take somebody else's idea. That's plagiarism. Don't do that, right? But once you're connected to who you are, you'll be able to come up with these ideas, from an authentic place, which is you, right? And so there's a number of ways in which, you can brainstorm ideas. First, with finding your likes and dislikes, and then you'll be able to understand, okay, well, this is the direction that I'm going towards. I'm going to, because I am interested in people being informed and people growing in wisdom, I'm going to have a wisdom podcast. I'm going to have a wisdom and wellness podcast, for example. I think there's someone that I know in the industry who does it, which is awesome. It's going great for her, right? Or maybe you're interested in pop culture. Let's say exposing the various dynamics of pop culture, exposing or unpacking the lives of people who are in pop culture, who are mainstream. Then you're going to have a pop culture podcast. If you are going to, let's say, be interested in something like health, or like a health podcast, yet let's say the pop culture narrative is the one that's most important. When you have someone who is involved in pop culture here and now, you won't be able to, and you're interviewing them, for example, you won't be able to feed off of each other in a very authentic way, in a beautiful way in which you can tell that the synergy between these people. In fact, it'll almost be quite robotic because you are not really connecting with this person. And you want to just speak about health and, maybe growing this person or healing this person in some way. It's not going to mesh. So hence the importance of an idea that actually stems from your interests, right? So now that you have the idea of the kind of podcast that you have, you kind of then have to now break it down or subcategorize it, if that's even a term, into actual topics, so topical ideas, if I can put it that way, where now you're not just maybe unleashing everything that you believe in one episode, but now you are kind of breaking down the topics, and just kind of making it a lot more palatable for people, right? And I know that may sound quite difficult because then you're like, okay, but I want to talk about this. How do I know what to start with when it comes to this? Where do I begin, really, right? And then this is where brainstorming podcast ideas kind of integrates with your niche, right? So when it comes to coming up with topics, and this is something that I actually found off of the internet, but you're here now, so you get everything, right? So now when it comes to segmenting these topics or trying to figure out what topic to come with, there's a system that I think is quite effective, really, that could help both you and your target audience, right? To make whatever you have to say a bit more palatable, right? And that's separating your topics with by finding out your niche goal, your niche topic, and your niche demographic, right? And so, okay, I'm going to say those again. Your niche goal, your niche demographic, and your niche topic. So we're going to start with niche topic, right? So let's say your podcast is about health, right? And you want to make sure that people feel better about themselves, that people are in the right state of mind, state of being, etc., right? In fact, by saying that, I'm already kind of unpacking it for you. So now you're not just going to just dump everything that you know about health and then just talk about whatever kind of health, right? It's very important for you to centralize the kind of health that you want to discuss. We're not just talking about health in general here. Otherwise, I can literally just go onto the internet or, I don't know, just go to the doctor or whatever it is and just Google whatever information I need, right? But when you centralize them, it'll make the conversation a bit more palatable. So now it's not just going from speaking about health, but now you kind of unpack it and you go, okay, now we're not just going to speak about health, but we're going to speak about mental health. And then that's the topic that you're going to unpack that day, right? And so sometimes even that alone could be a series in and of itself. And the deeper you go or the more centralized you become, the more you actually stretch out the topic. And then that's how series are created or seasons are created, right? So now it's no longer just talking about health or talking about mental health, but perhaps the season is mental health. And then the episode is mental health, how to overcome it. Mental health with men. Mental health with women, the causes of mental health issues, things like that. So it's a lot easier when you centralize it, because then you start to appeal to that kind of niche. So then people who are struggling with health are not just going to run to your podcast, but maybe someone who's struggling with mental health is going to run to your podcast. And then maybe a man who's struggling with mental health is going to run to this episode in particular that speaks about men's mental health. That's actually how you start to, brainstorm these kinds of ideas, right? And we're going to get a bit more into that when we start talking about just storyboarding your podcast. But let me not jump the gun here, right? And so that's one way to do it in the topic sense. Then you can do it in the demographic sense as well. Who are the people that you are appealing to? What area are you appealing to? So now it's no longer just, okay, I'm appealing to everyone in the world, but my target audience says I'm appealing to South Africans. Cool, that's target audience. But now, what kind of South Africans am I appealing to, right? So am I going to appeal to, let's say, I want to say the taxi association. I'm trying to think about things that are like, kind of unique to our country. Am I going to start speaking about, us being a rainbow nation? Am I going to speak about what group of South Africans am I going to speak to as well? And where are they from? Because if I speak to the general South Africa, that's a lot of people. I mean, we've got, over 50 million people or something like that. And then we've got, over 11 languages and many various different cultures. So am I then speaking to the South Africans that are, let's say, in KwaZulu-Natal, that are predominantly Zulu? And am I going to speak to their culture, or am I going to speak to, let's say, the people in KwaZulu-Natal who are, let's say, surfers, And then in that sense, now I'm speaking to, let's say, ocean junkies, and now it's no longer just the people in KwaZulu-Natal, but now I'm also appealing to the Capetonians who are so immersed in this marine life, in this marine world. The more you centralize it, again, coming back to your interests, the better it is, or the better and the easier it is for you to come up with these topics, right? And then it also goes with the goals one as well, your niche by goals. And then finally you get, the niche by goal, and it's essentially the same principle. What are the things that people endeavor towards, or what are the things that people strive for? What are the things that you strive for? What are your goals? What are the things that what are your objectives in life, You can unpack that for yourself, and then you start to speak to the kinds of people who have the same goals as you. So it's actually a lot simpler than you may think it is. It's not this like huge, overwhelming thing about what am I going to speak about. Look to yourself first, look to your interests, and then from there you begin to unpack, and then you realize, oh wait, I have a whole 13 episode season. Right, and now there's a lot of people who may think that what I'm speaking towards is passion in particular, right? So your niche is very much linked to your passion. And that's not necessarily a lie, but it's not the full truth. If you're just going to go with your passion or going to have a conversation about your passion, my gosh, we can be here the whole day, right? I can literally speak about my passions forever. And I may actually even go off on numerous tangents just speaking about what I'm passionate about, right? But there's something that I like to live by. I hope it's not going to sound crass, and I actually hope I kind of remember it now because I kind of forgot it. It was something I needed years back. But it's that passion without purpose is pathetic. And it's not something I heard from a philosopher. It's not something I heard from a book or whatever. It's just something that I had come to realize when I started following my passions without some kind of drive, without some kind of purpose. If your podcast has no purpose, if you have no purpose, you actually kind of, I'm not going to say the last word, but you can kind of put two and two together. And that kind of links to your podcast. You don't want a flat podcast. You don't want a podcast that doesn't have some kind of weight. You want a podcast that is purpose-driven. What is the point of people listening to you? Again, what's the point of your voice? Are you just speaking, or are you speaking purpose? Are you speaking weight and substance, right? So try to make sure that whatever you're passionate about, you link it to purpose. And from that, you will have a fulfilling and a very effective podcast. So this one we kind of touched on earlier on, right? Storyboard your episodes. I can't stress enough how important this is. I should know because I talk a lot. In fact, the first I want to say motivation for me having a podcast is because I talk a lot. I can talk forever. I'm that person after church who is literally keeping everybody waiting and they want to go have lunch. And my friends even called me Tsibinki because it was just like, they're even like, Felicia Mabuza, please just stop talking to people and advising people. That was my thing. Like I said, I have a wisdom podcast. I always liked, feeding people wisdom. But if you just keep talking, if I just keep talking about my passion, like we spoke about in the previous slide, if I just keep talking about, what I like, we can go off on a tangent, and it's very easy to lose people in that sense. I've experienced that, and it's something that I actually constantly have to remind myself of. But storyboarding your episode is actually one of the most effective ways to have a full episode in which you don't just talk about what you like and your passions, but you have substance there. You have something that's actually, going to achieve something. People aren't just hearing your opinions; they're hearing what they can do from your opinions. And so that actually brings me to how you should start your storyboarding, right? So what I like to do whenever I start my storyboarding, after I've unpacked, after I've realized, number one, what my podcast is about, and number two, maybe the kinds of topics that I want to talk about, I will write down the topic, let's say at the top of a page or, the top of my computer. Write down the topic. Instead of writing down anything else after that, sometimes I'll actually even put space bar, and at the very end, I'll write down the goal. So what is the point of this? If everything under that topic has nothing to do with the goal, I scrap it. I will literally start to scrap a lot of things that have nothing to do with the main goal. In fact, this is something that I learned in acting. We're not going to talk about that now. But Denzel Washington used to write down the goal of. There's a movie actually where he did this, where he wrote down the goal of his character at the very beginning of the script, and that kind of led and directed, how he was going to. Express this character. And that's essentially what you do here. So now once you have the goal, then you can start to unpack, the topic. So then now you go from what the topic is, and then you start to I want to say just vomit, just express everything that you want to express. Don't think about structure, don't think about anything. Just express all your ideas and all your topics. After that, you read through everything, right? And then once you've read through everything, you kind of start to highlight all the main points there. You start to realize, okay, here I'm going off on a tangent. Here, this is a good point. We have to stick on this, But as long as it's still linked to the topic and it still leads you to the goal, then you have a full episode. But until it doesn't, then you have either an oversharing, a dumping episode, or you have a very flat and weak episode. Yeah? So then now you have your topics and you have all the things that you want to share about, and you're super passionate, right? This is where the discipline really comes in. This is where I want to say let's say the longevity or the success of your podcast actually comes from. Nothing kills something beautiful, something great than inconsistency. Consistency is key with literally anything, right? So the one thing that you want to do is you want to create a consistent schedule. Why? This helps your audience trust you more as well. They know, okay, 3:00 Wednesday night, no, unless you're posting at night. Okay. They know 7 p.m. Wednesday night, it's me and Bahumi, we're talking wisdom. It's something that's ingrained in their brains that, I'm going to be fit today. If your thing is on pop culture, they know, guys, guys, drinks at my house. We are going to be sipping tea, sipping champagne, sipping drinks to whatever tea is about to be spilled on this podcast, because there's an expectation, man, for your amazing content. But then if you're inconsistent, it's actually how you start to lose viewers, because one moment you're there, the next moment they come on and they're waiting. It's almost like you're waiting for a bus that you expected to be here, but now it's not here. And then you're not going to come to the bus stop the next week. Now you're going to use a different form of transportation, And so that's the key thing here with creating a consistent schedule. Make sure that you're actually consistent with your schedule. And then also try to see, and this is something that we usually grab from our social media metrics, or our social media norms, or people's social media norms. You look at the people that appeal to your topic, and then you see, when are they predominantly online, not just on podcasts, but on your particular social media, in a way where the moment you start to advertise your podcast, they can see it at that very moment, and then tune into your podcast as well. Now, Another thing that people may not realize has a lot to do with consistency is how you structure your episodes, right? There is a certain way in which you deliver your episodes that kind of gets people knowing that that's you, that that's your thing, right? Most podcasters, it's not necessarily something unique, but maybe it's in their tone. It's in their tone. Most podcasters like to start with their most attention-grabbing point or aspect of the podcast and put that at the very beginning of the podcast. That's a type of structure. And so when the moment you do that, people kind of realize, let's say someone is going to jump onto your podcast and then they don't really know what the episode is going to be about. The first thing that they're going to do, because they trust that your first clip is usually your most compelling or what the podcast is about, is they're going to intentionally listen to the first few seconds of that podcast and then decide if they either want to continue listening or share it with someone. That's a consistency thing and that's a trust thing, but it's also very important because you know exactly how to grab your audiences, right? With me, I sometimes do that, but I rarely do that. What I do like to do, though, is give a very attention-grabbing introduction, whether it was something that was at the very end of my podcast episode, in the middle of my podcast episode, or at the very beginning. I like to make sure that you know what we're talking about from jump. I don't like the whole, hi guys, how are you doing? I'm fine. No offense, this is my masterclass. So if I think that that's what grabs my audiences in terms of, you know, maybe how I introduce my topics. I know that I have a very compelling introduction. I know that I have a very compelling voice. I hit, you know, I hit those bars, whether it's at the beginning or at the end. If I know that that's my thing, I use it. And my audience knows that I use that and they're grabbed from jump. You know, so try to format your podcast in a particular way that audiences can link it to you. You know, and the more, this is kind of something that you grow in, but you kind of start to realize exactly what grabs your audience's attention. You know, and then you move from that point onwards, and yeah. So now that you've got the gist of your podcast, the actual content, the actual, you know, weight, let's jump onto something that is actually a lot more important than people think, which is the branding and the artwork. No one wants anything blah, and no one wants anything that is unappealing or unrelated to what you're going to be speaking about. This is where this baby comes in. Thanks. Cool. Cool. So this was probably one of my favorite parts of creating the podcast that I currently have, which is Open Book with Bahumi. How catchy is that? Like, it's just Open Book with Bahumi. It's just, you can say it anyway. It's just awesome, right? You can't deny it. If you deny it, you're a liar. Let's not lie. Cool. So there's nothing more important than creating a catchy podcast name when it comes to branding and artwork. You don't want something that is super lengthy. People don't want to be typing literally the whole day just to look for your podcast, right? But you also want something that is easy on the tongue, you know, something that I can say to you and it's memorable, you know. I can't have something like, it's time to open up with Bahumi Mhlongo. It's just like, child, that's a sentence, you know what I mean? But you want something that is quick, that is catchy, almost kind of like a catchphrase, you know? Think of a very quick slogan and then make that your podcast name, right? But just because it's catchy doesn't mean that it's in relation to your podcast. You have to have something that very closely aligns with your podcast. And this is what, you know, this was the case with me in creating Open Book with Bahumi. I wanted a podcast in which people could open up and I could open up. And this is something very rare for me, but it wasn't a goal for me at the time, and still is. And so with that, I was like, okay, cool. Then I'm an open book, but with who? With me. Then Open Book with Bahumi it is, you know? So you want a podcast that links very much to what you're going to be speaking about. But you also don't want a podcast name that is going to limit you in any way. When I came up with Open Book with Bahumi, initially, it was actually going to be about me opening up my favorite books. It was very literal. You know, I was like, it's still me opening up. I'm still expressing it in an aspect of myself. So it wasn't just limited to opening up a number of books, but it also became me opening up chapters in my mind and allowing other people to be able to do the same thing. It's still within the confines and the relevance of opening up as Bahumi. So it's still about opening up, but I never limited it to opening up about a particular kind of topic, And I think it may take time, but it's something that you kind of play around with your name. You want a name that is relevant to what you're going to speak about. You want a name that is catchy. And finally, you want a name that is still not going to limit you in any way. It is possible. I did it. And you can too. Cool. So now that you have a name, perfect time to come up with the artwork that's going to link to your name or your kind of podcast. It's literally in what I just said, okay? It has to be coherent with your podcast. It has to be coherent with your name. And it also has to be, appealing in some way, right? I'm not saying that you have to create something that is maybe super complicated, 5 million different colors, and you think that that's eye-catching because it's colorful. That's not necessarily the case. But again, it's appealing to your audience because it's appealing to the type of podcast that you have, and then also appealing to your name. It's like there's no incongruencies, everything is quite coherent. When everything is cohesive, it becomes, something that is catchy to your target audience. So for me, my podcast is called Open Book with Bahumi, right? Yes, it's about opening up and opening up different chapters, etc. Do I have to have a book there? No, not necessarily, and I thought about that. But I do like the simplicity in conversations. I'm actually a very simple person. In fact, even my entire look in my podcast is quite simple, I want to say neutral. I like warm tones and things like that. And so that's where my artwork kind of came in. And your artwork is actually very much also linked to, let's say, even the look of your podcast, right? Like I said, I was and am a very simple person when it comes to, designing things and my social media or, my podcast in particular. So I like to keep things a lot more simple. Let's not overcomplicate things. My podcast logo is literally just an O and a B and a podcast logo. You don't have to overcomplicate it, yeah? And so this one, I think, is probably one of the most important aspects when it comes to how you appeal to people, right? And this is branding your podcast voice and style. Man, there's a lot of things I can't stress enough, but I think it's this one that I can't stress enough. It's a podcast. People will be listening to you. Your delivery, your tone when you speak to people is of utmost importance. It's probably one of the most important keys, really. It's so important because people don't get to see you. People don't get to see your facial expressions. People don't get to see your hand gestures. People just get to hear you. You're lucky if you have a visual podcast, but that's not the only audience that you're appealing to. But so because it's predominantly voice, you really have to make sure that your voice and how you speak is very clear. Now, this is something that I have refined and have been consistently refining, really. Your tone that you speak in is very important. Make sure that it's not an aggressive tone, for example. Make sure that it's not a very passive tone. A tone in which maybe someone would, doze off at, to sound quite direct and frank, But also make sure that it's not a tone that is just going to jar people. I have a very deep voice, if it's not obvious. But it's not so much about the voice as it is about the assertiveness when you speak, as it is about the clarity when you speak. It's not so much about the voice as it is about the speed in which you speak. Can people get your emotion? Can people get your heart and your mind just by hearing you speak? Or are you trying to appeal to someone's heart and maybe someone's compassion, and yet you are out here screaming and saying, you know what, guys, I love you. Like, love is such a beautiful thing. And it's like, you're talking about love, but why do I feel like it's hate, Your tone is very important when you're speaking about certain things. And quite often, your tone is very much linked to the topic as well. If I'm going to be speaking about love and compassion, maybe something sensitive, something that someone is struggling with, I'm probably going to speak in a calmer tone than the one I'm using right now to speak to you. I will be as assertive as possible, but I'll probably tone it down a bit. Pace myself. Listen to myself. And give you time to listen to your own thoughts. Do you see the importance in tone? It changes things, it changes dynamics. So consider that when you're speaking to your audience. What's the topic and what's your tone? And you'll go from there. And last but not least, we have something that is very much connected to your podcast, but actually isn't even podcasting at all. And that's how you're going to reach your audience. Bring people and draw them to your podcast. We all know that this is the best way possible, at least the one that I know of, and it's your social media presence. Guys, your podcast is probably new, right? If you're here, it's a new podcast, or you haven't even started it, or you started it but it hasn't been doing so well. It speaks a lot to this here. Your audience is literally everywhere, right? And this is the best way to reach them, your social media presence. How present are you on social media? And how can people take what they see on social media and be directed to your podcast? With my podcast, for example, I remember I started the podcast at a time where I was barely even speaking on social media. I would use my social media to post aspects about my life, post, aesthetically appealing images about my life, post food, post awesome things, post stories, all those things. And it's great. I have activity on social media, which is a very important thing. But activity misguided or misdirected doesn't necessarily lead people to your podcast. What is that thing on your social media platforms that leads people to your podcast, or rather makes people want to hear you? That's what I started then, experimenting with on my social media. I was like, okay, I want people to hear me speak, but these are the only social media platforms in which they can access me from. So how do I direct them from here to there? Let me speak more on my social media platforms. Give them a taste, give them a bite of what your podcast is about. You're not going to post the whole 30-minute or 1-hour podcast on your Instagram. Some people do that, and you'll probably get that one or those two people who will watch that entire clip. But social media is about the now. It's about that, unfortunately or fortunately in this sense, that instant gratification. So you give them a soundbite of what they can expect on your podcast, and with that they'll be like, I want to hear a bit more about this, and be directed to your podcast. And so there's various social media platforms in which you can do this. In fact, almost every social media platforms has video formats as well. So now you can access people can access you from your Instagram when you post a number of reels, for example. So Instagram is an example. You look at the analytics on there, you see how people relate to or gravitate towards content on Instagram. You do the same thing for TikTok. You do the same thing for YouTube. YouTube now has shorts, right? You use all these social media platforms in the way that best fits them, and in so doing, you're able to draw people to your podcast and grow your podcast audience as well. So. Right, so you reach people in all these various social media platforms, and not only do you use those platforms, but you expand your horizon of where you make your podcasts accessible. So it's not just making your podcast accessible on one podcast platform, such as, let's say, YouTube for video or Apple Podcasts for audio, but there's various streaming devices. You get Apple Podcasts, you get Spotify, you get Google Podcasts. There's many different ones, and people like what they like. So if you just broaden your horizons a bit, you're able to appeal to literally anyone and everyone at any time. That's literally the point of creating a podcast. It's not just about relating to a particular group of people in one sphere. It allows for a wide reach. And that's actually the point of, a podcast, or the reason why podcasts were created. People wanted a place in which they could listen to their favorite things, their favorite people at any given point, at any time, without being limited to visuals, without being limited to audio or being limited to audio at a specific time. They just wanted information and they wanted it now. And they wanted people that they could link to and relate to now. You can be that person. Don't let anything limit you. Don't let your social media limit you. Don't let your limited expertise limit you. Here we are. We're here to help you. This is the perfect time to start. There's no better time than now. It's easy. I just proved it to you. Now go and create.